like to call to order the Presque City Council meeting of January 18th, 6:03 p.m. We have 6 out of 7 councilors present, so I'll declare we have a quorum and we'll conduct business. Would you please stand with me to pledge allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everybody, for coming this evening and participating in our meeting. This meeting is mostly the tabled agenda from last week, which was January 17th meeting. And I just want to repeat again what that was all about. We had a conflict of use in the room. The room had already been scheduled by another board, and they used the recordings and features that this room allows to have happen and stuff to conduct their meetings. And they had already scheduled the room before we put this council meeting on top of them. So they were nice enough to wait a few minutes while we conducted our opening segments, and then we tabled the public portion of the agenda until tonight, which we are going to take up now. So this is basically last week's meeting. It's not 2 meetings in a row, basically. So the first item of business is for citizen comments. So this is an opportunity for people of Presque to come on up and address the city council for a couple of minutes. Please come on up to the podium, state your name and your address, and tell us what's on your mind. So we'll open it up for citizen comments at this point in time. Any, yes, sir. Come on up.
Chair, I have comments related to number 1. Would you prefer I do that then, or citizen comments?
You can certainly, we'll allow that to happen under option 1, sir. So
Thank you.
we'll do that then. We'll make sure. Is there any other citizens who would like to comment this evening? No? Okay. Well, we'll close the citizen comments then, and we'll go to old business. And again, this is our tabled agenda from January 17th, which is, our first item is to discuss the Presque Industrial Council appointments. So would you like to open the comments there, sir?
Certainly.
And you have the podium. I don't know if that microphone's working or not, but
I'll do my best.
Yep, you should be. Yep, you're perfect. I think you're in the field now.
My name is Frank Bemis. I've met each and every one of you before. So I'll just give you a bit of background. I was a city councilor at one time. When I was a city councilor, I was appointed to be on the Industrial Council. And since being on the Industrial Council as a city councilor, I've remained as an at-large director of the Industrial Council. As you all know, I'm one of 7 directors, and 2 are at large, like myself, or no, 3 are at large, like myself. 2 are from the chamber, and 2 are city councilors. And it's been that way since I joined. The board we have manages the property owned by the city on the Presque Industrial Park. From time to time, we do leases, we do short-term rentals, long-term rentals, development. Our charge is to do development, to try to bring jobs to the city of Presque Isle. I am extremely proud of the Presque Isle Industrial Council, and I think from what I hear, this council's been proud of it recently and in the past. And that's a result of many different directors, but also the employees we have there who do a fine job. But we're really not debating whether it's a fine job or not. We're debating, as I understand it, whether the bylaws need to be changed. The spirit of the bylaws as they exist today should remain, in my opinion. And I'll give you a bit of history. The city of Presque Isle has had the same bylaws basically until about 2022. There was some discussion that someone who was an owner and or tenant of the property was elected. That person was Gary Nelson, hello Gary, had some interest in joining, and discussion was had at the Presque Isle Industrial Council to whether it would be appropriate for that to happen. It was my opinion then, it's my opinion now, that it would not be appropriate. It was discussed at multiple meetings. It was passed unanimously at the director level at the Presque Industrial Council. Recommendations were made to this board, the City Council, to make changes to the bylaws, and the bylaws were changed in 2022. There were no votes against it at the City Council level. I'm not sure what changed, because Mr. Nelson, I believe, voted for that back then, and he's still has been a councillor since that time. But at the initial meeting where people were appointed, there had to be 2 new councillors. One of those councillors was Mr. Nelson. It was raised that he was ineligible to be appointed due to the bylaws. The council heard that from our executive director, Tom Powers, heard it from Louis Cousin, the acting city manager, and heard from Mr. Courier, the city solicitor. Despite that information, the council proceeded to elect him to the board. Our chair, whose name is Scott Norton, he can't be here tonight, he's in Florida. He sent a note to I think to Chairman Kevin, saying, this does not comply with the bylaws, please fix it. And since then, it's been a roiling issue for us. I speak for myself, but I've talked to each and every current director of the Presque Industrial Council, and I believe I speak for them in saying that we all support the bylaws, at least the spirit of them, to remain in place. This is not about Mr. Nelson. If this was Bob Humphrey, who I greatly admire as well, another, meaning Mr. Nelson and Mr. Humphrey, are fantastic businessmen, I would not support him being on the Presque Industrial Council. It's about what is right and what is a conflict of interest. I've written to you all already with my thoughts as to why that is, but I'll go over it a bit with you. I believe it to be an inherent...
Frank, I think we're going to discuss this all at length very soon, and I think we understand completely where you're coming from, but there's also a lot of items that are also not defined well in the language as it sits, which I think we've also discussed, and just in the interest of time, I don't think you'd be displeased with what we intend to do at this point in time. If you would like to
Well, I've been
have us do
presented
that.
with, I've been presented with information from the city solicitor that I was sent, and I do not agree that you should change bylaw section 8 or article 8 and replace it with those. I don't know what your plans are. It's
We're not
difficult.
in any position to do that this evening, actually, because this is not a meeting of the group that would do that, which is, as you know, the membership of the Presque Industrial Council, which there's no meeting scheduled for that at this point, and we have not made any decision because that was the intent to discuss with your board.
Councillor,
Yeah.
if I could ask Mr. Bemis
Frank,
to summarize,
please.
Frank, to give us a 2-minute summary, to continue to speak, but give us a couple more minutes and then we can move
Well,
on.
I'll cut it short. I wrote to you on January 22nd, 2024. I'd be happy to submit that as part of the record or in an abbreviated fashion as to my main arguments. But in essence, I believe it to be an inherent conflict of interest because of putting adverse position of the person who is also an owner or tenant on the park from being on the industrial council. Many times we have to send our director, executive director, to do our bidding. He does the executive functions. We simply set policy. And we have to have communications with owners and tenants that sometimes upset owners and tenants as to what it is we're doing. We don't always see eye to eye. There's negotiation and other things we have to do. And it can create some bad feeling. It puts him at present, Mr. Powers, in a terrible position. It puts the other directors in a terrible position. There's confidential information. We receive information from businesses all the time that want to buy things, rent things, enter this city and do business with the city. They can come to our board, which is not subject to freedom of access laws. It's not subject to the cameras. It's not subject to the press being there. We are operating, doing the city's business, and you have to trust that we're doing the right thing. We do not have the same inherent conflict of interest that an owner or tenant has on the park. There are other reasons for it. The directors would have to deal with the person who's an owner or director on the park, and then face them when they have to do negotiations for some other issue. It puts everything in an untenable position. It creates too many inherent conflicts, and it's impractical to try to go case by case and try to say where there is a conflict or not. I am very familiar with saying I have conflicts because I'm an attorney, I represent different parties, and I announce those conflicts, as you know, Kevin, and sometimes I have to leave the room. Sometimes I can proceed. But I do not have an inherent conflict that prevents me from participating. And I think it's a mistake to change the bylaws in any substantial fashion. Thank you.
Can you kind of explain that, Frank, what an inherent conflict of interest would be? Or where that could arise?
One of the things that's being presented is that we would evaluate whether there's a direct conflict of interest or not. Let's say you have one direct conflict. I represent a client and there's a lease under discussion. I have to leave and not talk about that client's lease. There are, however, sometimes there are indirect conflicts. I've had the issue of whether we raise the short-term rentals. I've announced I'm a short-term tenant at the park. I pay the rate that we've established for everyone in our community. There's a list, a waiting list for who's on it. I waited like everyone else. I feel I can vote. That's an indirect conflict. I announce it, but there are so few indirect conflicts of interest. They do not add up to something. Basically, if you have something over and over and over, and if you have information that can help your business through what you're doing on the industrial council, if you have interactions with
Such
our
as,
employee,
I mean, an example. I want an example.
setting prices for land sales, finding out what other tenants are paying
Wouldn't
for
make
their
any difference
property.
if you weren't buying any land.
It wouldn't. But
Right.
what if you are? What if you wish to buy more land?
Yeah. Then
What
you'd
about the
abstain from-
interactions between fellow neighbors, interactions with our tenants? All of those create conflicts. And that's what I mean by an inherent conflict.
Would you like to have your edict entered into the minutes?
Yes.
Is it say that this is entirely your opinion and may not represent the other people?
I think I said it earlier.
I think you did, but I just wanted to.
And I said that at the beginning of my discussion. However, after, I'll let them speak for themselves, but I did, as I said, speak to the other four, and, you know, they
Okay.
indicated, and I think Mr. Smith, Derek Smith, who couldn't be here either, he indicated support of my position in writing to you.
Yeah.
Certainly shared the sentiment.
I agree.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I appreciate the comments. Is there any other motions before us, before we start a discussion?
Yep, so we have a motion to reconsider the approval of the council appointees to the Presque Industrial Council.
And those names are,
Myself and Gary.
okay. Is there a motion by Craig, is there a second?
Second.
Then seconded by Jim. Now we'll discuss the motion. Would you like to start?
So, as the bylaws are currently written, I have a conflict of interest myself because the bylaws are so general and so not well written. And were written so broadly as to make sure that they covered every facet that was possible to preclude anyone from the park doing anything on the board, that it includes the names, named specifically items such as shareholder or owner. A shareholder or owner of a property on the park could include many things, and one of them is stock ownership. Stock ownership can include mutual funds or anything else for that fact. So I would find it difficult to believe that any of the members of the Industrial Council at this point are actually legal members of the council, and are probably all in violation of the bylaws because they probably own stock in PepsiCo or Coca-Cola or Frito-Lay, because all of those are held in the S&P 500 index of stocks in more than 1.8 million shares that are distributed around the United States. So the language in and of itself is problematic because it doesn't address that it's a majority shareholder. It doesn't address controlling shareholder. It just says shareholder. So I own mutual funds. They hold Coca-Cola, Pepsi, and Frito-Lay because they are part of the S&P 500. And as such, as the language is currently written, I am not eligible under the rules as it is currently written to be a member of their board of directors. But I also find that it's probably unlikely anyone that has a 401k is any different. So I think what we need to do is have a discussion, which I think is healthy, and nobody is trying to force anyone's hand, but the language does need to change. And I'm sure that's why Mr. Bemis, Frank, said the spirit of that, and I think that probably goes to what this issue is. But currently, as it sets without changes, I have a conflict. And so for that reason, I am removing my name at this current time until such time things can be addressed.
And I think it's well known that Gary Nelson owns a business that is occupied, or surrounded by the industrial park. So, Gary, are you currently? Oh, you own your land and building?
We do. We do not lease anything.
You don't lease anything
No.
from the park, right?
No.
Okay.
We own all of our property.
No. You were a second. Would you like to comment before we open it up for more discussion?
Yeah, you know, I think that the spirit of what we wanted, which was somebody who has direct experience up there, could be helpful. And that's what we wanted to have. I think that it's kind of been lost amongst a lot of emails. Personally, with the spirit and I guess what I'm hearing from the board up there, it's more of a personal conflict. You guys kind of had that conversation back in 2022 and changed the bylaws. So here we are again. I'm a new council member, so I don't have as much experience. Hearing that some of the council members did vote this in is very surprising to me, especially seeing where we are now. I guess I'll close my comments with, I guess, the best piece I saw all week from any email from anyone was what I was sent today from the Northern Maine Regional Airport as far as their bylaws. Something that I could read, something that I could understand, and something that makes sense and has a relative point to what we're dealing with. If we could have gotten to that a week ago, that would have been great. But yeah, I definitely look forward to reaching some sort of conclusion that works for everybody. I was brought into the board saying how great you guys have done and how proud. So there definitely is no feeling on here that you guys have, not done a great job for the city. They were cheering for you the whole time that I was been on. So thank you.
Welcome.
Kev, I'd like to make a comment.
You
So
have the floor, sir.
I went around to a bunch of different businesses up on the park myself and had conversation with quite a few business owners, renters, lessees, and the general consensus of the majority of them were that they welcomed a property owner on the industrial council. They highly recommended that there be an owner that could represent their interest and their take up on that industrial park. That was the general consensus. So I just thought I'd throw that out there just so you guys know that that's what they think should happen.
I have some comments too, but I can go last. So, anybody else want to chime in? I'll discuss a little bit about what Jim just mentioned, which was the 2022 vote where the city council, the membership committee adopted the bylaw change, which is comprised basically of the city council plus the city manager and the executive director of PIIC. Bylaws were presented to us as part of an annual review, which is typically a look over the shoulder at the past year in a budget format, you know, of what they were able to accomplish for the city, and it's very, very summarized. It still takes some time to go through, but it was basically presented to us with the same, in the same vein as an annual review, and the paragraph was read. We didn't really get the opportunity to really think about the ramifications, and now it's popping up on us. Normally, bylaw or wordage changes are usually reviewed for at least 30 days. Probably in hindsight at that point, we should have looked at it and said, well, let's take 30 days to look at this and convene another membership meeting. We didn't do that. We voted it that night. I believe I made the motion to accept the change, and I think Mike seconded it according to the minutes, and Gary was also there that night. We all voted in favor of it because it was just part of the review. And now, you know, in trying to do something very quickly, now we discover that, well, we've got some issues with it, whether it's the shareholder thing or whatever, or the ownership thing. And I think that what we need to do next, and what I'm proposing, is that the two boards put their heads together and try to develop some language that works for both organizations. And that's what we're going to attempt to do. But before we do that, we have to take off the two names that are there currently right now. And so that is the motion that's in front of us. So I believe that with this tonight, we can move forward with a discussion about bylaws and maybe get a draft before the Presque Isle, the membership committee of the Presque Isle Industrial Council meets and vote that change, whatever it may be. So that's my comments for where we're headed. Mr. Hughes, how are you?
Very well, thank you. My name's Ray Hughes. I've been a longtime member of the Presque Isle Industrial Council. And I would like to first off say that I support Frank's comments and the email that Frank had sent outlining his concerns 100%, as I believe Derek and Margot and Scott do as well. But I would like to say I would take a small exception to your characterization, Mr. Chairman. The amendment to the bylaws that was proposed in January of 2022 had been discussed for at least 3 months, if not longer. Two members of the City Council sit on the Industrial Council. I assume that they report back to the City Council issues that come up that may concern the City Council. So I don't think it was done in haste. I don't think it was done quickly. I think it was done with a lot of thought. And a lot of consideration, a lot of discussion. A recommendation came forth to the City Council at least a month prior to that meeting in January in 2022. And at that meeting, there was ample opportunity to discuss the ramifications of that amendment. And as you said, Kevin, you made the motion to amend the bylaws, and it was voted 6-0 unanimously. I disagree with the characterization you presented that it was done in haste. Thank you.
Well, I'll defend that because I was on the Presque Isle Industrial Council, and I don't recall exactly who the other person was, if it was Randy or Mike at the time. So neither one of us reported back to the other 5 members of council. It was not part of our discussions, and as you made mention earlier, the minutes of the meetings of the Presque Isle Industrial Council are not subject to public, so we don't share those directly with people in the room. So the other 5, whereas 1 or 2 of us may have been to 1 or 2 meetings, we didn't share that with the rest of the council. They were presented it the night of January during that review.
I think the issue, Kevin, if I may,
Yes?
is that you and Mike have been, just as all the councilors have been, very active members of, you are at the same level of activity as all the other directors, and we're fully involved in it. You can tell that every single person reads the minutes that we have and is involved. Do we have perfect attendance? No, but we're very good about, attendance is excellent. There's nothing about our deliberative body that happens in haste without
No, I'm not
city
saying,
council representation. I think that's the point.
not trying to step on your words, Frank, but I'm not saying you guys do anything in haste. I'm saying the other 5 people here and the vote of the 6-0 vote, taking my vote out, 5-0 vote, was done in haste. Okay? And that's kind of water under the bridge. We're really debating about something that happened 2 years ago that it is what it is, you know, and we're dealing with it now. The other thing that when I ran the meeting in January here a month ago, or earlier this month, I guess, seems like a month ago. That's not part of our policies and ordinances. There's nothing in there that's transcribed from there saying that we've got something for Presque Housing Authority in there that we can or can't do, but there's nothing in there from City Council, and that was happened 2 years ago. So those policies and ordinances weren't transcribed for that meeting. They weren't put in to our rule book, which is what I was going by that evening. So I went ahead and appointed the people. So it's been brought up about the bylaw thing. We've got to take these names off, which is a motion in front of us. And we'll do that, and then we'll address the bylaw thing at its appropriate time, and then move forward with the names, whatever they might be.
My motion again was to reconsider the approval of the council appointees to the Presque Industrial Council.
Yeah. Yes, again, thank you, but is there any further comments about this motion? All those in favor of the motion, raise your hands. That'd be 6-0. What a coincidence. Okay.
And the second motion is...
You have another motion?
I do. The second motion is to
Okay.
remove the names that were ratified in the January 3rd meeting of the City Council from our published list of appointees.
Okay, so we motioned to reconsider, and now we're motioning to remove the names of Craig Green and Gary Nelson.
Right.
Is there a second? Seconded by Jeff. Thirded. Thank you. Discussion? All those in favor? All those opposed? 6-0. Does anybody else have any motions?
I guess that's it at this time as far as business that can be held, because we are not in a published time frame in order to have any other meetings of the Presque Industrial Council in order to make any changes or anything else until such a time as I think our intention is to have a discussion with you folks to discuss how we
So we'll work on the bylaws and then
specify them better.
do it as quickly as possible.
Yes.
Okay. Then that concludes old business for this evening, and we'll move on to new business. And I'll ask the interim city manager, Louis Cousins, to discuss the police chief review committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have convened a group of folks to begin the process of reviewing the applications that we have. I can name them if you'd like.
Yes, go ahead.
Larry Clark, Mike Thibodeau, Jim Carroll, Hank King, and myself as that group who will begin the process of reviewing the applications for the chief's position.
Do you have a timetable roughly, Louis?
We would like to move on this very quickly, so we'll be contacting everybody and trying to set up a meeting first part of next week.
Great. Jim, Hank, you guys are in touch with him? Good. Looking forward to your progress then. Anything else?
Thank you.
Thank you. Second item is the economic and community development vacancy discussion, and I'll let our manager to open that subject for us.
Yeah, well, thank you again, Mr. Chair. We have begun the advertising process through the HR department, Ms. Chapman. We also had a brief discussion, just a couple of us, about taking a good hard look at the responsibilities that position currently holds and maybe looking at reconfiguring that in some manner. Maybe across a couple of different people or three. So I'd like to suggest that we have that further discussion as soon as we can.
Okay, great. Would it be possible maybe to send out some sort of an outline as for what, maybe in an email form or something, so that we can take a look at that? Possibly.
Absolutely. I
at some
think,
point.
I think a beginning discussion with you and I maybe to try to set some goals or where we
Okay.
want to end up with, and then follow that advice.
I don't mind that, is, we can have up to 2 counselors. Does anybody else want to join the discussion? Economic development. It's just possibilities. Hank, you want to try to? We'll figure out our schedules, and then maybe we can get together with Lewis and start to flesh out some ideas. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
It concludes new business for this evening, and that concludes our tabled business from January 17th, I think. That would lead us to the manager's report.
Thank you again. I do have a few things to mention. The number one, most important thing is the airport director, Mr. Wardwell, does have the new EAS RFP in hand. He's expecting to receive bids by February 23rd. He's scheduled to meet with the Airport Advisory Committee on February 26th, and he'll be looking to be on your March agenda to move forward in that process. So that's a very important piece. We have gotten word from both the county's ARPA fund grant opportunities and the Northern Border grants. And we had a department head meeting with all departments involved and went through what the opportunities were for projects to get funded. And all the heads are looking within their departments right now for things that they can come up with that makes sense for application to those funds. DOT, Dana Fowler, our city engineer, has the new 2024 work plan in hand. There are several projects in Presque. The one I'll mention in 2024, and the one I'll mention is the repave of Main Street, 2.33 miles of Main Street. So that would be the whole thing. Earlier today, Tom, Brad, and I met with Nautilus Solar, which is the company now in charge of the 2 arrays that were put up on the Industrial Council. They expect to be generating electricity, I'm saying mid-May. They said early spring, so mid-May. We should start seeing some results from that, which does include savings on our electrical use. The eclipse planning, they're actually expecting a good turnout here. And there's been a lot of discussion and planning underway involving the emergency management group, the police here, the local hospital, and plenty of the businesses who would be affected by this, what we're calling an influx for that day or maybe 2 or 3 days. And an informational piece, the police department has rehired Joe Seeley for a specific task. There's a law enforcement accreditation program that takes a lot of paperwork to get approved for, and Joe has experience in that, and he was available, and Deputy Chief Chris Hayes had an opening, so they put it together, and this should work out really well to get that done. Coming up also, the D-Day anniversary is planned. Craig is very involved in that, and also the 25th anniversary of the Presque Air Museum at the same time. So it's the 80th anniversary of D-Day, and there's a lot of events being planned for that day. Our HR department intends to have W-2s out this week coming. Dog registrations are due January 31st without penalty, and it's an extra $25 after.
Per dog.
Per dog, yes. So that adds up quick. And the last thing I reported to you last meeting, that we hadn't turned the heat on here at City Hall yet, the oil heat, I should say. That has changed. We are now heating the basement floor only with the oil. It got cooled down there, but the rest of the building is being serviced by those heat pumps. So that was it.
Thank you very much, sir. That's a great report.
Thanks.
For announcements this evening, I only have the one announcement that the next Presque City Council meeting will be on Wednesday, February 7th at 6 p.m. in council chambers. And we invite the public to participate or see us online. And with that, I'd entertain a motion to move into executive session of 1 MRSA 4056E for legal consultations.
Kev, can I make another comment?
I'm gonna say no
Okay.
right now,
All right.
thanks. Yep.
Yep.
So we're moved and adjourned for legal consultation.